Our last speaker for the evening is Dr. Aparna Watve. Aparna Watve has a doctorate in botany and has worked in the field of biodiversity studies for more than 20 years. She has been especially interested in research on rocky outcrop habitats in India and is a part of global network of researchers trying to conserve these ecologically unique habitats. She teaches various courses on environment and society interactions. Currently, she is a visiting faculty at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She has to her credit more than 20 scientific papers and 2 books published. She also served on Mahabaleshwar Panchgani High Level Monitoring Committee and is currently a member of Plant Expert Committee of Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board. Dr. Aparna Watve would be addressing the ephemeral landscapes of the Western Ghats through her talk, Rocky Plateaus, the Natural Heritage of Western Ghats. I now request her to come and kindly take over.
Thank you so much. It's always very difficult to come as the last lecturer, and especially so after 2 of excellent lectures that you have already heard. Ketaki talked about sacred groves, which are basically forest habitats, and Hemant talked about mangroves, again a very different kind of forest. Both are extremely important and necessary, conservation is very necessary. But what would you feel if I tell you that right now you are looking at one of the most endangered habitats that needs to be conserved? So this picture looks like any other area. In fact, looks like a very degraded area. Something, maybe somebody had cut down forest and you see grass growing everywhere. However, this is exactly what I'm going to talk about. If I tell you the name of this place, some, bell might ring. This is Kas Plateau of Satara, which was recognized as World Natural Heritage Site. This is not the picture that you will see, on the promotional material. You will see beautiful blooming flowers, but this is how it looks for in a month of June, and it looks even worse and even more degraded and barren for 8 months of the year. But this is the habitat that has attracted me from almost 2001. And the reasons are many. I'll go through them one by one. I chose this topic today because ISOLA, when they asked me for this lecture, I was attracted by this fragile landscape concept. So fragile is not the word that is often read or wasn't often read in ecological literature. We would say sensitive. But I think fragile is an apt word for this. Fragile is something that can easily break, that can easily degrade, and something that is irreplaceable. Once gone, with the smallest of disturbance, it cannot come back. And I think if we are talking about Western Ghats, or if we are talking about habitats in Western Ghats, nothing describes it better. We already have done a lot of damage. It's difficult to repair it, but at least let us be aware that how sensitive, how fragile it is. So I don't have to go into details of what is landscape. You all, most of you are from landscape ecology or have learned it or are practicing it. So landscape from an ecological point of view is all the things that have shaped it, including the abiotic factors, including the biotic factors, and the humans also in that. And when we talk about ecological sensitivity of any area or any habitat, we talk about one is endemism, how unique are the plants or animals or communities in that. That means how geographically limited they are. Are they seen everywhere, or are they seen in just, maybe a few square kilometers or one area? Second is rarity, how rare it is to find. Sometimes you find a species only in, 2 weeks of monsoon and never again. So that is rare. And third is how interrelationships between them have evolved. Certain species of plants are pollinated only by a specific insect. Some birds only live on certain fruit, nothing else. So these are interrelationships, and they have formed over millions of years. It's not something that the bird has suddenly developed a taste for say one fruit. It can't happen like that in evolution. So we are talking about geological time scales. We are talking about evolution, and what we see today in this brief lifetime of ours, which is maybe, at the most 70, 80 years, is but a snapshot of time. And in this small snapshot of time, we are seeing degradation everywhere. So most of us today, at least, we were talking about areas in Western Ghats, Konkan area. Western Ghat, as you know, is a chain of mountains. It stretches from the border of Gujarat right down to Kerala. It is not a classic mountain range. It's actually escarpment of the Deccan Plateau, which was entirely formed by volcanic eruptions several million years ago. This area and the Konkan and Malabar area west to that is that small greenish strip that you see, and it has been recognized as one of the 18 major biodiversity hotspots in the world. Biodiversity hotspot, one identification is based on how many endemic species are there. So it should make us feel good, how that Western Ghat has those many endemics. But the second criteria is how many of the area is under threat. So this hotspot designation is because of the endemism, high endemism, and high level of threat that we are facing in here. This picture is from Thoseghar waterfall, again in Satara, and classic of northern Western Ghat. Western Ghat in the Maharashtra region has got a very sharp edge, almost a free fall of a few thousand feet. It's very important from the point of view of people because entire Western Ghat supports the water. It is the catchment area, and for several generations people have been living in and around it and are using it. It also has many of the interesting habitats. One is, of course, the forest itself that we see on the top in the picture. But the cliffs, the free cliffs that we see, have got some species which are seen nowhere else. They cannot grow anywhere else because they are adapted to vertical walls. Then there are shrub areas, then there are herbaceous or grasslands areas. All of them are quite unique. And from my point of view, one of the most unique of that is the rock outcrop or Rocky Plateaus that we see here. So rock outcrop is not a very well-known habitat. They are seen across the world. Many of them are famous tourist places because they look so obvious and geologically they are interesting. But for most of the times they look dry. So people did not recognize very easily that they also have their own special biodiversity. And that took time. And only in the last 20 years or so, we are realizing how unique they are from the point of view of plants as well as animals. Rocky Plateaus can be seen at two places or two areas in Western Ghats. One is on the mountain tops. So the top of this hill fort, many of you may have visited the hill forts. If you go to the top does not have forest because we have very high frequency of wind. We have extremely high rainfall, which does not allow, even if soil is prepared there, the soil does not stay there. It just gets washed out. The nutrients that are formed, they get washed out. So we have a very thin layer of soil and we have a very large rock surface which looks almost barren. And we have other kinds of rocky plateaus, the coastal plateaus, which are seen in Konkan. So this area, a large part of Konkan from Ratnagiri, Sindhudurga area, which was previously underwater, and that has eroded and that has converted the volcanic rock into laterite. So you all are aware that we have basalt and laterite, two typically different rocks, and lateritic plateaus are very common in Konkan and in Satara and in Kolhapur district on the mountain tops. They have a geological history of about 66 million years. So they are very stable landforms, but what happens is they don't appear to be so. They don't appear to be old. It seems like somebody has disturbed them. So this is generally the distribution of them. We see southwards of Mahabaleshwar, we see mostly lateritic plateaus, and northwards we see plateaus of basalt. Some of you might be into trekking and visiting forts, and I'm sure many of you are aware of these sites because they were already known to trekkers, mountaineers. And then as botanists started visiting these places and started documenting plants and later animals, we came to know how they are important for biodiversity as well. So when I talk about Rocky Plateau ecology, I'm talking about various different things. One is how they are formed, geomorphology, geology, then what kind of species grow there, how unique they are, what are the processes, like for example, how does the water flow on that, how do the nutrients flow on that, then what are the interactions among them, and also, very important, how people have been using them. Because throughout the lecture, we'll see that some of the habitats have been already under use of people. The biodiversity existed on this in spite of the use of people because the use was very limited or of a certain nature, like grazing or minor walking of people does not disturb the biodiversity there. But if we change the frequency or if we change the intensity of the human activities, then we see a very large change happening in the habitat itself. This picture is from Dhangarwada, a site in Kolhapur, and the vast open rocky area that you see here is the lateritic plateau. In Marathi, they call it Sada. Laterite, the rock is known as Zamba. It's a reddish colored rock. Most of the architects either have used it or would like to use it because it looks so beautiful. It is also very interesting from the point of view of mining because just below this laterite, we find bauxite, which is a ore of aluminium, and it's in high demand. The forest around the plateau looks green throughout the year, but it's not really the best of the forest. It's pretty stunted. It does not have enough nutrition to grow into tall trees like you see in the valleys or in southern Western Ghats. And it's exposed to extremes. If you go to these places in May, you may not be able to stand outside because the sunlight is so harsh and the temperatures can go up to 60 degrees at rock level. It's very hot. And because of that, it's also very dry, so you won't find any moisture there. They're almost like deserts there. But the same place in monsoon can be completely different because this rock does not allow water to seep through easily. So in monsoon, because we have very high rainfall in monsoon, this entire area will be flooded by water. So it will become a temporary wetland. The soil formation here process are very slow, and the nutrients, whatever are formed, phosphate is deficient. So already there is a limitation on what kind of plants can grow on this. And ultimately what happens is that we find species which are very specific to these areas. And therefore, because they have specialized to that extent, they will not be able to grow anywhere else. They will not be easily growing in my garden or on terrace or on parks in the city or anywhere else. They will not be even growing in the grassland areas. They will be able to grow only there. If you visit these areas in monsoon, you will know what truly the life on the plateau is like, because every single inch of the rock is covered by very minute organisms. These are lichens. We also have blue-green algae, or what are known as cyanobacteria. They cover everything. So it's very wrong to have this assumption that they are barren. In fact, in many of the places, and even like if you have seen topo sheets, these areas were marked as wastelands or scrub areas or rocky waste. And today, if you look at Wasteland Atlas of India, you will get the best maps of Rocky Plateaus because they are all marked as wastelands. This is something that we are trying to change. But the reason is that they were seen as non-productive areas. That means they can be easily available for industry, wind farms, urbanization, without considering the biodiversity. So only when we started studying the biodiversity and understanding it, we started realizing that these are far from wasteland. They are plateaus of life itself. This is again cast, but there are many sites like this. They come into their true colors at the end of the monsoon, and you see a lot of ephemeral species blooming, that is herbaceous species, which are short-lived. Because their strategy is very simple, that if they cannot deal with winter or summer heats, then they just have to go dormant. So they remain dormant for 8 months, and in that 4 months, they have to complete their whole cycle. So they start growing in June with the first rains, and by September, they are flowering. It's necessary that they all flower at one time. They are not doing it for you and me, they are doing it for the insects. So unless they're so small that unless they have this vivid displays, no insect is going to be attracted to them. And most of them are insect pollinated. So to attract the insects, they put on these displays, which today also attracts a lot of tourists. But it's very important that this cycle continues. There are many other strategies that plants have used. Not all of them are ephemerals. So this is one of the few species. This is a silver fern. This is desiccation tolerant, so it's perennial. It remains throughout the year, but in a dry, desiccated state. Just like we keep our peas in a desiccated, or coconut, desiccated coconut, we put it in fridge and then use it by making it moist. Same way, if you see the brownish leaves, they are the ones which are desiccated. They are not dead, they are only dried. The moment they get even one bit of water, they start opening out and becoming green like this. So which means that they can tolerate the heat, they don't have to die, they don't have to start from scratch when they get water. So immediately they can start their life processes again. There are other species which can do this, and it's a very rare trait. It's not easy for a plant to sort of go from desiccated state to live state immediately. So all over the world there are just like 400 species which are able to show this kind of adaptation. So this is one of them, and we also have some grasses. Now people are looking at this because what if we can identify the genes which do it and put it in the crops? Constantly every monsoon there is an outcry in the paper saying crops have died because there was a dry spell. Scientists are seriously thinking that if they can identify what causes this and put it in horticultural crops or even the grain crops, it can save us a large amount of money. The other plants here, they are not very fussy. All they need is a few millimeters of soil or even just moisture, that is enough. So these are little gardens that form on the plateaus. Monsoon creates seasonal rock pools, and this is a species in Konkan, Weisneria triandra. But you have to understand that this rainwater is one of the freshest of all. It has fallen directly there. It hasn't accumulated from running through urban areas or anything. It is the cleanest of the waters. Its pH is less, it's acidic. And these species have grown, they are growing there, and they can tolerate only those conditions. A certain temperature, a certain pH, a certain level of nutrients is all that they can tolerate. Any minor change in that, they will not be able to live. Aponogeton satarensis has been named after Satara. So Satara has got some of the major lateritic plateaus on the mountain tops, and this species grows only on 5 of these plateaus. And this is globally, it is seen only in this tiny plateau areas. Already there is disturbance on the plateau. So if one of the plateaus is lost or one of the habitats is degraded, that is already one less from the global population. It is extremely rare. It has been listed as a red list species. That means it is on the verge of extinction if the disturbances continue. Another species, this is Ceropegia jaini. Ceropegia, this is a flower, and the flower is about this big and the plant is about this big. So it's tiny. It has got a very small tuber. It can grow in the crevices of the rocks, and the plant puts all its energy into making that one flower or 2 or 3 flowers. This is different from any other flower because its strategy is not to wait till the insect comes to it, but just to trap it. Once the insect comes or once the insect tries to go inside, there are hairs which prevent it from coming out and the insect is trapped. the insect has to struggle inside, and that is when the pollination happens. So this plant is very proactive in getting its pollination done properly. Other plants have to, maybe have scent or nectar or beautiful colors to do that. Again, you will see it in Amboli, some of the Rocky Plateaus, and in Satara.